My dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M.P. Satija, Professor retired from the Department of Library and Information Science, Guru Nanak Dev University at Amritsar. We have to discuss today the work of classification making in the verbal plan. This plan is also very important after the work in the idea plan. After making a map of entities or the universe of knowledge to be classified, we shift the next phase of work called verbal plan. In idea plane, we dealt with pure concepts without proper names or even without names, as if pure ideas in the mind. But the concepts, howsoever important, cannot be communicated if not given proper names or some identity, mostly in the language. We need to make them somewhat concrete, so to speak, in order to handle them and work on them and communicate them. Language is a dress of thought, has been said rightly, and it brings them out of the realm of mind. Naming an idea or concepts make it communicable. Concepts, when given proper and unique names, are called terms. Science of terminology is a system of terms which uniquely represent a concept in our language. But the language used for this purpose is controlled and selective, though it is drawn from the language that we speak or listen in our day-to-day life and work. This controlling and use of selective language in our field is called vocabulary control, which is important for designing classification and indexing systems and also for dictionaries or glossaries. Such tools are very essential for exact communication in science, research, business, law, and of course, information retrieval in libraries. This work of vocabulary control is carried out in the verbal plan. It is important if we want to reap the benefits of hard and scientific work in the idea plan that we did. In this module, we will learn the importance of terminology and also study principles to coin terms, new terms to convey our ideas properly, fully, and correctly. As Sir Ranganathan formulated many canons for the terminology work in this verbal plan. Verbal plane. Work in the idea plane is with pure concepts, without specific, concrete or pakka names given to them. An idea without a name cannot be conveyed at all, not to speak of properly. If idea plane is a message, verbal plane is its linguistic expression. Language is the dress of thought, said the famous Dr. Samuel Johnson. In this phase of classification work, we give standardized and pakka names to the concepts arranged in arrays, chains, and filtry sequence as we did it in the idea plane. Ideas are something airy in the mind. They cannot be well expressed and communicated without having their proper names. In this phase or plane, we dress the airy ideas in proper and visible garments of language, of standard terms to handle them, to convey them, to communicate them. In the field of sciences and all other technical subjects like art, accountancy, politics, or literary criticism, these standardized names for concepts are known as terms. And science of assigning terms to ideas is called terminology. Verbal plane deals with terminology management. Nature of language. No doubt, language is a vehicle of thought and also of social, academic, technical, and research communication. Without it, there could not be civilization. there will be no progress, perhaps no art or science without language and its communication. Without a developed language, we will not be able to think even. It is the human species which has developed a sophisticated communication system in the form of language. Without language, there will be only animal living, not human living, as we have today. Language a paradox or ironies. But any language spoken by any community is both rich and poor. Many times it fails to convey the thoughts properly due to its inherent inadequacies. There is always a dissipation of thought between the language and the words to convey it. Too often we grope for proper words to express our feelings or ideas. It is vague at best. Synonyms. We said that language is both rich and poor. Synonyms seems that language is rich. It is rich in the sense that usually it has many words for a single concept. For example, wages, pay, salary, all this mean the same thing. Similarly, in Indian languages, Suraj, Surya, Shashi, Dinkar, Prabhakar, Aditya all mean the same concept, that is sun. Lord Krishna has many names from Gopal, Girdhar, Govardhan to Nandlal, Kanhaiya, Murli, Manohar, Keshav, Kunj, Bihari to Sham and many more. These are all synonymous words which make our language rich, and any can be used to convey the word. Different words have the same meaning are called synonyms. Homonyms. These are the converse of synonyms. Language is poor in the sense that one word may denote more than one meaning. For example, cricket is a popular game and it is also the name of an insect. Bridge is a construction over the river and also a name of a game. Beas is a river in Punjab and also a town in Punjab. Ganga is the great river and also the name of many men and women in India. A word having more than one meaning is called a homonym. In English, there is hardly a word having only one meaning. It is said that the word order has 250 different meanings in the English language itself. So is the case with words in all the languages. Ranganathan finds 5 meanings of the word classification in the technical sense. Causes of duality of language. Why a language is both rich and poor at the same time? It is a duality, paradox, irony. Homonyms and synonyms grow naturally in all the languages depending upon culture and physical environment. Nobody makes them. They grow as the flowers grow wild automatically. A desert dweller has many words for sand. In India, we have individual terms for different family relatives, whereas in English, the term uncle stands for many different relations. Indeed, language is social and culture. These are vitally useful for literary writers. Homonym synonyms make a language interesting, imaginative. They make the writing flexible, delicious, imaginative, playful, and rich with aesthetics pleasure. It is a boon for the fiction writers or literary writers. Various interpretations give birth to creativity, imagination, and that leads to also enjoyment and your own interpretation. Barriers. Linguistics, terminology, semantics are vital to classification and communication in every sense. Language, like classification, is the ultimate retrieval text. Paradoxically, the very importance of language has lured many to reject systematic classification and use uniterm, keywords, and free text for information searching and retrieval. But the uncontrolled vocabulary filled with ambiguity, redundancy, and omission has made mess of information retrieval. It has become a barrier to what it is supposed to facilitate. Synonyms and homonyms are a great barrier in professional communications. even harmful for legal and business transactions, science and research communications. What is a boon for a literary author is poisonous for a scientific writer. Homonyms and synonyms are classification records, says Phyllis A. Richmond. For information retrieval, use of uncontrolled vocabulary is disastrous. In science and technology communication, we should be precise to the extent that one word should have one and only one meaning, and vice versa, that one meaning should be given to only one word. It means an ideal or perfect situation of one-to-one correspondence between concepts and terms, though it is hardly realized. That is, language of any science and academic field of study and research should be strictly free of homonyms and synonyms, because these homonyms and synonyms, though very useful in our daily language for aesthetics, for literature, are very harmful, just like weeds in science communication. It has already been achieved to a great extent in natural sciences and the related fields. Social sciences, including library science and information science, are struggling for the standardization of terminology in their disciplines, and the work seems quite far off. Majority of a discipline of knowledge can easily be measured by its standardized terminology. The rule is very clear and precise. The terminology, more the rigorous the terminology, more rigorous the science. That's why natural sciences are hard sciences, as they are called, and social sciences, where terminology is not as rigorous, are called soft sciences. Ultimately, perfect and concise, precise terminology expedites all types of information exchange in every field. Terminology management is essential for documenting and promoting consistent use of words. Vocabulary control, organizational efforts. Homonyms and synonyms cannot be controlled in a society, but for technical languages in professions, they are necessary to be eliminated. So there have been many efforts by different international organizations and national organizations to control the language, and it's also known as vocabulary control or scientific terminology. The 1980s was called the decade of languages. According to an estimate, more than 10,000 tools exist for standardization of terms in various languages. Many countries have established their academies for purity and progress of language, which makes up the work of terminology standardization. At the international level, for technical terminology, the Technical Committee of the International Standards Organization, ISO TC 37, established in 1952, is charged with the promotion of international standards for terminology management. TermNet, the international network for terminology, was founded on the initiative of UNESCO with the aim to establish a network for cooperation in the field of terminology. In 1988, it was registered as a non-profit organization, that is NGO. It provides an international cooperative forum of global network for creation of technical terminology in Indian languages. The Government of India, under the Human Resources Ministry, established in 1961 the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology (CSTT) of MHRD. Work of Ranganathan. As Ranganathan always urged librarians to learn and use technical terminology of library science for research and communication in our field. He also advised librarians to learn the technical terminology of other subjects for better information retrieval and to provide satisfactory reference service to scholars of various subjects who come to them. Use of standard terminology or controlled vocabulary is essential in assisting users in their search of databases, OPACs, or manual catalogs. These, in the form of terminological databases, always assist in human or machine translation also. Ranganathan always used well-defined technical terms in all his writings and has left a treasure trove of technical terms as a legacy for us. It is our bounden duty to use and further develop the terms of library information terminology coined by him. Language is living and dynamic. Language, including technical language, being a living and dynamic entity, keeps changing in many ways. New terms are coined to convey new concepts and theories. Some old terms are deleted as they become obsolete with time and not used by scientists or by their professionals. Some of the terms even change their meanings over time. Meanings of a word may differ from discipline to discipline and cross cultures. Stages and dialects of a language prove this. In our discipline, old terms such as open access, browsing, networks have acquired different meanings in the electronic environment. Terminology management. Ranganathan has mostly dealt with choice, that is currency, and display, that is context of terms in classification schedules. More important is the selection of terms for construction of a vocabulary or for making classification schedules. Elaine Savanonius has given the following principles for selection of terminology. Literary variant. It means the terms for inclusion in the controlled vocabulary should be derived from published literature. This should not be imaginative. User variant. For making a terminology user-friendly, common usage has become a deciding principle for selection of terms for vocabulary control. Scholarly usage. Sometimes scholarly usage is favored over common usage, but it is only essential that when the information retrieval is meant for advanced researchers and practitioners of the specialized field, we have to use scholarly language. Ranganathan's views. Apart from other scholars like Savanonius, Ranganathan, as given in his Prolegomena, has also laid down rules for organization of glossaries of technical terms. He writes, there should be an organization to attempt to delimit the vagueness of words and eliminate ambiguity. Establish an agreed standards terminology free of homonyms and synonyms for each subject field, and lay down methodology to coin new terms when new ideas come into being or an old term has to be replaced. Ranganathan was a great advocate of the use of scientific terminology. He was convinced that until our librarians use scientific terminology in their professional work, our library science will not become a science in the real sense. He told us that as a librarian, we have to doubly learn terminology, terminology of library science, and also the terminology of our users with whom we have to communicate and provide reference service. Ranganathan not only himself coined many new terms, he also formulated many principles for coining and display of terms for library classification systems. The first and the foremost quality of any terminology is to be free of homonym and synonyms, he said. Then following are some of the principles or canons he formulated for this purpose. Canon of context, it means that terms should be listed and read in the context of the upper link. Canon of enumeration means that the terms should have also subtopics to tell its scope. Canon of currency means that the terms that we use should be current among the specialists. The terms which have become old or obsolete should be replaced by the current terms being used today. And then is the canon of reticence. It means that the terms that we use or write should not be judgmental or critical, it should be neutral ones. Canon of context. This canon lays down that the terms in the classification schedules be written and read in the context of the upper class. Context is not to be repeated. For example, Instead of writing simple salts, double salts, complex salts, we should write as follow: salt, then its subparts should be single, double, complex, and while reading we will read it as single salt, double salt, and complex salt. For the brevity and simplicity of the schedules, it is not necessary to repeat the upper link. Display of terms should be governed by the principle of hierarchical force. It gives context and meaning to orphan terms. This canon is meant both for the classificationists and the classifiers. This common sense principle also applies in our daily routines. In the schedules, every concept has to be read and interpreted in its environmental context. It satisfies the law of parsimony and keeps the schedules tidy and slim. DDC follows this canon very rigorously, and that's why the DDC rules look very tidy. Canon of Enumeration. Language being social, scope of terms or disciplines is never universally settled. Their connotations vary from time to time, even from classification system to classification system, and even from profession to profession. For example, subject dynamics is considered a part of mathematics by some and of physics by others. As another example, documentation is a part of library science and column classification, while in UDC it is an independent class. Further, constitutional history is not part of political science or law, but of history in colon classification. Ranganathan has justified it. In such cases, no one is wrong. It is debatable and it depends upon the culture. In such circumstances, it is safe to delineate or write in black and white the scope by explicitly listing, that is, enumerating its subdivisions. It is a operational and pragmatic way to define the scope of subjects. In the schemes like DDC, it is done by plenty of notes attached to the verbal entries of every class number listed in the schedule. These notes are definitional and scope notes. These are class here notes and class elsewhere notes to bring out uniformity in deciding the scope or area of a class. Canon of Currency. As said earlier, language is living and changing. Terminology in any discipline is not static or frozen. It is always dynamic and moving and changing. Some terms become obsolete with time. They disappear in use, while many new terms are born every day. Even the old concepts get new meanings, and old concepts may get a new term. Old terms may denote new concepts. A classification system must always update its terminology using current terms with their explicit connotations. New editions of classification system not only include new knowledge or concepts or subjects, but also use current terminology. And sometimes they give new names to old subjects. For example, in the DDC, library science has become library and information science. Home science has become home management. It will not only help in efficient information retrieval, but also make our classification system respectable in the eyes of scholars and subject specialists. They will understand it better. This canon of currency lays down that terms used to denote a class in a scheme for classification should be one current among those specializing in the subject field covered by the scheme. Canon of Reticence. This canon means or dictates that the terms that we use in the schedules of classification should neither be judgmental nor critical. The librarian should be neutral. It should not be opinionated. The fourth edition of the Dewey-Decimal classification used the term humbugs for parapsychologists. As another example, one should not use the term major or minor authors while dividing literary writers. It could be hurting to someone. It is not proper for librarians to categorize authors so to be contemptuous of a subject believed by others. Literary historians may describe authors in such terms, but not the librarians or the classification makers. A classification system should use current and neutral terms. Canon of Consistency. Another requirement is of consistency in the use of terminology by the schedule makers, which Ranganathan seems to have omitted, though it is very much in accordance with this philosophy. It means form of a term should remain the same, disregard of the usage or literary variant. For example, if a controlled vocabulary has included term group tests, intelligence test, then if synthesis is needed, then we should use group intelligence tests instead of group intelligence testing. No matter whatever the literature uses the later compound term. Ideas, important ideas, every idea need a language to be conveyed. Language is a vehicle of thought. Otherwise, ideas will remain in the mind unknown to other persons. But at the same time, it is paradoxically said that the language that we use is also some sort of barrier in communication. It becomes a barrier when we do not close our ideas properly in the right language, in the right words. That's why we work in the verbal plan to coin right terms for the ideas to be conveyed in our classification schedules and also in the scientific work of making terminologies or in the what's known as vocabulary control. In the verbal plan, we assign standard terms to the concepts in the idea plan. Verbal plane gives concrete names to the airy concepts in the idea plane by clothing them in standardized terminology which is known to others. A standardized language free of homonyms and synonyms terminology is vital for any science communication and to serve as an indexing language for information storage and retrieval. Otherwise, our information storage and retrieval system will not be efficient. Recall and relevance are the chief concern of any controlled vocabulary for information retrieval. So, in a schedule of classification, terms should be current and written and read in the context of the upper link. Their definition and scope can be best determined by enumeration, that's by listing its scope and the subterms and other subtopics. The terms that we use in our classification schedules or in our indexing terminologies should be current, not obsolete, but not judgmental or critical. We should be reticent, and their form should be consistent throughout the given system.